So here we are. I think it's very important to start with what the intentions of my video are. And my intentions are not, in any way, shape, or form, to be reinstituted as the commander of my unit. I knew the second that I opposed the sitting director for an unlawful, unconstitutional order that would be the end of my outcome. And then subsequent to that, once I was resigned, I knew with every effort that I put forth to this, it was going to bring discomfort and pain against my family. And so before I went on this route, though with a heavy heart I knew I had to proceed, I absolutely prayed and asked for my wife for a blessing to go forth. She said, press on. I wanted to make it clear that if I didn't know any context, I knew nothing about this story, and I was viewing from the outside, I would probably think this is a group of disgruntled guys, they got their feelings hurt, there was personality conflicts, and now they're being cowboys. I get it, I really do understand that, but the reality is that couldn't be further from the truth. After I was relieved, I went through every possible effort to ensure that Governor DeSantis had actual notice of this situation. I have since learned that the Chief of Staff for Governor DeSantis, Jason Weta, is in hand and understanding of some of what is going on here, and he's reached out through a mutual friend of mine that has nothing to do with the Guard, and we are intending to have a conversation. And I give nothing but a gesture of goodwill and trust that him and Governor DeSantis, when they see this and understand the situation and the magnitude of this and what the citizens are going to fail to have provided for them, there's no way they won't act. It is because I watched Governor DeSantis during 2020. I'm in partnerships with multiple other families for my business. And in that business, in 2020, we were completely shut down. And over 60 days in the fitness industry, we lost up to 60 grand. And we wouldn't have survived. And I reached out to Governor DeSantis at the time. What ended up happening was his chief of staff then called me. She said, Governor DeSantis is very reasonable. Help him understand your point of view. I articulated the measures we were going to take and how we wanted to take care of our people. And Governor DeSantis lifted the burden on us. We were able to open back up. By God's grace, we were able to press forward and continue. So 5 years later, here we are. I never wanted to be in a position under the state or under the federal government again after I left. I loved the time that I had in the military, but I became absolutely tired of seeing high-level leaders in those positions just continually take out repercussions against their men who were with absolutely good faith trying to put together their best outcome, trying to serve the nation. And so whenever I left, I just went into the fitness industry and I ran businesses. In 2020, based upon Governor DeSantis' response, the attorney that helped me get to the representatives and the representatives that helped me get to Governor DeSantis, I knew then that if this were ever to happen again, in any way, shape, or form, that I would have to be prepared to take care of those around me. And so I decided to go to law school. Well, I'm 3 months out of graduating law school now. And so for me, this is a big deal, taking care of people. We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are Floridians. And though we may have disagreements at times, this is not about a dividing line between political sides. This is not about two opposing thoughts. This is about what we can all agree on, which is that having bureaucrats in leadership positions that are concealing their actions to the highest level of the administration while taking advantage and sucking the resources from what Florida taxpayers have paid into. Every purchase that we make, every toll that we drive through, that money goes towards a belief that we're going to make an impact. And the legislature in this state did something that no other state did. They not only created a state defense force in the Florida State Guard, but they created a unit within that, a specialized unit, one capable of bearing arms, detecting bad acts, apprehending in times of crisis, times like hurricanes, times when you're going to put your people out into the most arduous situations, when it is completely impossible to predict the outcomes. Those men must be armed in order to defend themselves in times of chaos. And so the legislature knew that in the same way that if you're somewhat sick, you just go to the doctor. But if you get in a wreck on the road, you need an ambulance to come get you. And what happens when the ambulance then gets hit and 17 trees fall down and there's torrential rains and nobody can get to them. Who goes to help them? The Florida State Guard does. And that's what the legislature put in place. And that was the intent of the people who elected them. They had absolutely foresight. And one of the most incredible things that the legislature did when they built this organization, this agency, was they made it a volunteer agency. This is distinguished from the federal government. This is distinguished from National Guard, because every single time a member decides to go on orders, they are volunteering to put themselves under that agency. And in the absence of accepting those orders, they are just a citizen. They're a civilian. So when I'm not on orders, or rather could have been on orders because I've since been relieved of both command and kicked out of the Guard, I'm just a citizen. And so here's the citizen. This is the story. This is how this broke down. This is the reality. Well, before I took command, we all graduated our selection, where we started with a high number of soft individuals and we were weeded down to roughly 40. And after that selection, in January of 25, it came to August of 25. And the civilian that was seated over the top of the SMU, supposed to build the SMU out, had done absolutely nothing. He had run multiple Zooms, if you will, bringing the people together and telling them that their perception is that they're cowboys and that nobody is going to want to work with them, that they're considered unprofessional. And these talented men and one woman, an amazing one at that, had all decided, this isn't for me. I'm not volunteering to come out and be treated poorly after. When we collectively look at the 40 different members of the SMU at the time, you have over 700 years of global war on terrorism experience. You have people that bring skill sets that are completely impossible to send somebody just to a course. You have an intuition, you have an understanding of what it takes in absolute chaos, how to maintain order, have a mind that can deal with the stress, prevail on the other side, and bring home our fellow brothers and sisters. And so after this, Jay Arnold at the time, he was our sitting chief of staff for the Florida State Guard. He asked me, with my men's blessing, except I was not excited about the job. In fact, I didn't want the job. I have law school, I have multiple businesses, I have 2 teenage children. I don't have a lot of free time. And so I didn't actually want the job. I just wanted to carry a med pack and save people and have no responsibility. However, God had different plans. And I told him, I don't know if I can do that. So I said, let me go pray about it. And I knew that this was going to carry a heavy burden. My wife was going to have to give up a lot of time that she otherwise would have had with me. So I prayed about it, and she said, I believe you're the man for the job. And so reluctantly, I accepted that leadership. That was in August. 3 weeks later, we started our very first training. 48 hours after I was appointed, we had a task organization. We had the state broken down into different sub-teams that could respond in a moment's notice. And the very first training that we decided to do, because I knew this was the most important piece, was weapons training and a weapons certification. I was unwilling to let myself or any of our men onto Florida soil carrying a firearm without a clear standard of the ability to prove that you are capable of making a good call in a judicious manner in the defense of yourself or others. And so what happened was we conducted that training, and over the first 2 or 3 days, after we had already shot the qualification that was supposed to be then just scenario-based training for the end of the week, Hurricane Helene popped up. And we went from having never done anything together in a united team to having met a shooting certification so everybody was qualified to carry a firearm, to launching off on the storm. We went out and we ran the edge of that storm, and we were able to make a giant impact, and we were able to get to the Emergency Operations Center, all of the disaster areas. And so we finished that mission. I get to my house and I get a phone call. This just hit North Carolina really bad. We have an aircraft coming for you in an hour if you can go. I turned to my wife, I said, thoughts? She said, go. And so I boarded the aircraft and we launched off to North Carolina. And so 1 hour after that phone call came in, we headed to North Carolina. And while in North Carolina, it was absolute pandemonium. As we're in North Carolina, Hurricane Milton news comes in. 3 weeks straight, a volunteer force deciding to serve the citizens of Florida. And not just the SMU, the Florida State Guard as a whole. This organization is not the Florida State Guard. This is Floridians that are answering the call, that are not under a contract the way you are in the National Guard, that are not under a federal contract, They are a group of men and women deciding to put their life, liberty, and property at stake in order to respond to other citizens. That is Florida. This is Florida. So after all of this transpired, I was able very much so to take this exact same unit and do amazing things. And when I say that's not the reality. The experience that I have, my mentors within the unit that call me their commander, they have tremendous experience. They understand how to make an operation successful. And I trusted and I relied on them day in and day out. And all through 25, we worked with other agencies supporting them and helping to provide security for citizens in an unprecedented manner. And so therefore, I really was left alone. My chain of command was not overly burdened or bothered by the executive director. I have a speculation of why that is, but I literally almost never talked to him. After we would complete a training or operation, no phone call, no congratulations or otherwise. And that's okay because I'm not in this for pats on the back. I'm in it in order to serve the citizens. But I add it for context so you understand what the interaction looked like. It wasn't until October of 25, after we had been operating with absolute success inside of this unit, key leadership across the different units and at the full-time staff reached out to me. Why me? I don't know. My speculation is that because they knew that I stood for integrity and I was willing to protect every one of us. And I believe that to my core. You know, God will not have his glory made manifest by cowards. So they reached out to me and they told me that they're fixing to go public and that they're going to take this to the IG as well, because the egregiousness of the director was so out of hand that there was no way they could continue. So I naturally did some due diligence and inquired, what do you mean by that? Help me understand. And their answer was alarming. It started with the executive director was using aircraft and state paid for assets and money in order to further his private pilot license in his own benefit. The guy gets paid $174,000 a year and still decided that wasn't enough. I don't need to take my own private pilot lessons. I can just use state money and assets to do it. But I still wanted to understand, what does the totality of this look like? And so next I understood on more than one occasion, he had diverted fixed-wing aircraft for his own private pilot license, including pulling from training and even canceling an operational mission that was in place to protect Florida and the U.S. borders. However, the next thing that was added to me was even more alarming, to be honest, and that is that 16 different key leaders of the organization had left from the full-time staff and the volunteer side. We lost director of operations, we lost director of finance, we lost UAS managers, we lost different purchasing agents, all that have institutional knowledge. And maybe the most egregious yet, we lost the commander who resigned of the Crisis Response Battalion, as well as the Aviation Volunteer Commander. I've now been relieved, and the only sitting commander left that started underneath this executive director's leadership is the Maritime Commander. And when this institutional knowledge is removed, it cannot simply be rehired. There's nobody that can fill the gaps of understanding what years of wisdom in this agency look like. So after hearing all of this, I reached out to one of my members who I knew was close to the Lieutenant Governor to make it aware at higher administration, after all efforts had already been exhausted. And we were concerned that when Florida needed us, that there would be no agency to reply. He had a conversation with me, and I outlined everything and gave him the contacts for who it is he could actually hear the exact allegations from, their statements, and willingness to swear to every word of it. He set up a meeting with Jay Collins and Theme. And what came of the meeting? Nothing. But my member's name, who brought up the concerns, was disclosed. Theme went on to continue his personal private training, and not only that, more full-time staff resigned, the CRB commander resigned, and Theme decided to sua sponte under the authority that the legislators built in Section 6 to carry a firearm out working by himself with other agencies. Mind you, while carrying this firearm, he never shot the same qualification standard that the rest of the specialized unit sought. And so the question is, did one, he violate an established procedure for the specialized unit, or two, did he never actually ratify what that was and therefore breached his duty to ensure that before a statutorily created unit goes out into the mission to serve people, that they had some sense of a standard of what would be reasonable for them to carry a firearm. You can't have it both ways. And how did he seek retaliation against that member? Simple. My member is an advisor to the federal government to work with states on how to best train and equip them for security and rescue purposes. This involves Florida as well as many other states. He's done this job for 12 years before ever joining the Florida State Guard and still does it now. How much does he get paid in this job? $0. He does it on his own altruistic means to try to provide for the best outcome for states. He did it then and he still does it now. Our director called this a conflict of interest and sought to counsel me for his interaction with other key state leaders. It's completely unconstitutional for a couple reasons. One, he doesn't have the authority, and nor do I, to give a counseling statement to an individual operating in an individual capacity. We do not contain the authority to compel his First Amendment right of speech as an individual outside of the Florida State Guard. I was given the notice of this counsel, not by FEMA, of course, but by the Chief of Staff, whom he directed. She emailed me my counseling statement. I said, let me try to provide a rebuttal. And to that, he then finally contacted me about a week later saying that my entire unit was off track and needed course correction. Mind you, I sent all this by email and there's records to track every bit of it. So I had a conversation with him on the phone where one of the key things he told me is that I do not serve my men, but I serve a seasoned executive, and I have forgotten that. To which I told him, sir, I'm not sure what you're asking me to do. I cannot issue an unlawful, unconstitutional order compelling one of my members' speech. That would be unethical, unlawful, and I am not willing to violate the Constitution. He then told me that I had to send him in writing what my formal rebuttal was, and afterwards I annotated the entire conversation on email, all of public record, very alarming conversation, and I sent my rebuttal pro se for myself with every bit of a legal understanding and explanation of why I could not issue this order and how it was unconstitutional. I didn't hear another word. This was on 19 December. Christmas came, Christmas went. 9 January, I was officially given a letter saying what you see on the screen, based on loss of confidence and trust in your ability to command the unit and be a member of the Guard. Now, mind you, between 9 January and 19 December, without hearing a single word from FEMA, a real-world rescue recovery mission popped up. But I knew I had better get approval. So I got approval from my direct supervisor, the Chief of Staff. I was given the green light and we were able to send out operators in under 2 hours to be able to support this mission. And I was able to send in my members with my exceptional team to put in place men that were able to execute a mission with our aviation side and send them 100 miles on a helicopter into open water in search of missing Floridians. But the outcome of this was not a single phone call, no congratulations to my men, and apparently I could run a real-world mission sending men 100 miles into open water, but he no longer had confidence and faith in my leadership. And then subsequently, 9 January, I received this message. Now, mind you, I do not have a single disciplinary record against me. I have 100% operated with full approval on everything we've done. Every single operation, every single mission, I got records for. I have impacts, timelines, and outcome. Every bit of it. And I say all that to close with this. We as Floridians cannot have a director over an agency such as this that is willing to so easily step over constitutional rights of his own members in retaliation for his actions being brought to awareness. If he's allowed to do this, then where does it go next? Lord only knows. Governor DeSantis, Chief of Staff Jason Wida, I humbly ask you to investigate this. I have receipts for every bit of this, and every allegation made, there is members willing to testify to this, and they have the proof. Thank you for your time. I'm humbly humbly grateful for you having the commitment to Florida and the willingness to endure this entire conversation. Thank you very much.